Hey guys, the Irrational Skeptic here, and this will be my second video. And today I would like to discuss a question that came up. I received this question, and I'm guessing it's because a lot of people um, still assume that the MBTI, the Myers-Briggs test, or the MBTI in general, is still a valid way of looking at uh, personality typing. Very quickly, the MBTI categorizes um, the types uh, into 16 varieties. And this is not arbitrary. This is based on or originally it was based on a four function model of the functions as detailed by Carl Jung. These functions are thinking, feeling, a sensation, and intuition. Carl Jung further stated that these uh, functions tend to carry an orientation, uh, either uh, inward, which is introversion, and outward, which is extroversion. So, yeah, that's the basic premise that Myers-Briggs was going on when they formulated the 16 types. Um, it is basically just it's mathematical. If you use the fact that everyone uses every single one of these four functions to an extent, then you automatically get uh, 16, and that's it. It's four by four. Um, as simple as that. But what ends up happening, I guess, for people that want to discredit the MBTI will be that, for example, when people take these tests, they tend to get different results at different times. You might take it today and you end up INFP, and you take it tomorrow and you end up ENTJ, and so on. Um, though I would be careful in trying to use that uh, measure of, let's say, uh, invalidating typology in general, or Jungian typology, more closely in discrediting the MBTI. I mean, so there are some sympathies that I tend to have for those that would like to disavow the MBTI altogether because of maybe it's the unreliability of the online tests. Most people that tend to shift between types are usually people that take these online tests and then they come out and get on their blogs and they start blogging away. Oh, well, today I got this and tomorrow I got that. This just shows that I'm all the types actually. Um, and yes, to a certain extent, you are all the types. This is about preference. This is not about um, hard wiring. Although there is a component of of being hardwired in this. So I'd hate to make it sound as if um, people can change their types. Uh, because this is it's a pattern that is uh, Carl Jung would call these archetypes, but it's a pattern that is established uh, from a young age. People start showing these patterns very early in life, and it's just it's a preference that you will kind of fall back to when openly interacting with people, or basically, for example, the introversion extroversion dichotomy shows where you get your energy from. You either get your energy from being alone for some time. Some people get need to be alone for long periods of time, weeks, months, before they can go out and uh, interact with people again, and they would be spending energy when they went out and oh, dropped my mic. They would be spending energy when they went out and interacted with people, and then the extroverts, they um, it sounds funny, but yeah, they go out and they interact with people, and they're getting energy. They feel most energized when they're in the mix of things, and when they're alone for too long, they start to feel drained. They start to feel like they need some sort of reinvigoration by people and by external activities. Um, and yeah, that's the basic premise. So I would assert that because people do not really understand what Carl Jung was suggesting, it is quite ingenuous to purport that it is completely a ludicrous theory. That kind of from Carl Jung, then we derive things such as the MBTI and socionics, but they all have the same kind of founding father, so to say. But it's not to say that Carl Jung was completely original either. Um, he maybe put it more succinctly, and if you read his book Psychological Types, you'll see he puts it very succinctly. It's a very dense book, and he goes left and right as he writes on this topic because it's a very dense topic. It's not the patterns that he points out, which are the archetypes that he points out through history. Uh, he has to give a lot of background for the stories that take place and for the actors acting in those stories. Um, so I will also add that I don't think that because a system of typology does not uh, completely describe a person from A to Z, it means that it has no validity. That is not that is nowhere close to true, because it doesn't purport to explain an individual's entire experience. Carl Jung himself actually um, tends to warn against this view in his book, so he is not even uh, trying to categorize people per se, um, but a certain extent of categorizing is necessary in our everyday normal functioning of life. We see uh, a water bottle. We see a water bottle, and there's different kinds of water bottles. But when we see a water bottle, we still call it a water bottle. We don't have a different name for every single water bottle that we see, even though they're each individually unique water bottles. Another example is we stereotype televisions. We have different size of televisions. You have a 40-inch television, there's a 60-inch television, and so on. And there's, 20-inch televisions. There's basically a lot of different kinds of televisions, but we don't tend to say that um, you're stereotyping a television wrongly because you're calling the 60-inch one a television and the 40-inch one a television as well. Granted, we do say 20-inch TV set, but I'm trying to speak generally here, candidly. This is just how we we normally interact in society. We normally interact with things. We normally interact with the world around us through categorization. So I would uh, hate for people to assume that because categories kind of intrinsically exist, uh, for us to make things sense out of things, that it is now reducing people to categories, because that is not true. Um, and I like to say that there are also many things in reality that do not describe everything in totality. But no one seems to go after these things and call them, let's say, invalid, because no one expects a single theory to explain the totality of things. So why not just use what it is supposed to be used for, which is, in my view, a kind of a tool for a self exploration, exploration of the mind, exploration of yourself, or understanding communication styles between people, how what people are fixated on when they talk to each other, what kind of words they pinpoint and drag out and whatnot. And if you say this to five different people, they all take it different ways, that kind of thing. So one of the examples I like to use is, uh, and I'm not conflating here typology with, let's say, physics or anything, but Einstein's theory of relativity does not describe the very small universe that is better described by quantum physics. And there has been no, till this day, reconciliation of the two views of the universe. Newtonian physics describes many things, such as the exact orbits of some of the heavenly objects. Although it has although it has been superseded by more nuanced theories, we still to this day use it to predict many events in the sky. So there are things about Newtonian physics that are not applicable to more nuanced views of the universe, but it's still applicable, meaning you can still use it to predict exact uh, events, which is very, very wonderful, to say the least. Um, so I would be careful in trying to assert falsehoods about a well developed theory of human behavior, a well developed theory of uh, archetypes, as Carl Jung put it, which he saw that they existed. He was basically 100% uh, sure that they existed through through research. It was or through history. It was seen that these are the main functions which kept on uh, uh, appearing over and over again: thinking, feeling, sensation, intuition. And the fact that they each carried a direction. They either carried a direction toward one's own inner universe, or they carried a direction towards the external universe. And he saw these as all being valid. Um, so this is where I would give a credit to some people in the um, scientific community, such as Dr. Dario Nardi. He has tried to root some of these functions in brain science. He does EEG um, scans of people's brains and tries to look for patterns, correlations between the types and specific brain regions. So he uh, would would call these cognitive functions, meaning that overwhelmingly, let's say INFPs use brain region X, or uh, overwhelmingly ESTPs light up in brain region Y, followed by brain region Z when performing a task, you know? So, yeah, those kind of things. But I will warn here, yes, uh, there is no concrete evidence that shows causality rather than correlation. So I will not want, I don't want to make that erroneous conclusion. Neither does he in his own, he writes in his some of his writings. In one of his books that I've read, I've forgotten the name of. Um, but yeah, I can include that down in the description if anyone wants to take a look at his stuff. So yeah, I mean, I do get how maybe to the skeptic that comes in and says, "Oh, well, how is this any better than astrology?" Because we this is a famous jab that is usually used. I think I've seen an episode of Adam Ruins Everything on TV, and that was basically his premise. How is this any better than astrology? I mean, if Myers-Briggs just went and made something up and then started putting people into boxes for organizations, which this was primarily the use. It was used for business applications. And so companies were able to know people's different communication styles, um, know how to organize teams that would create less friction and whatnot. Uh, and because it really, a lot of people don't like this because it maybe plays into an area that is not, especially nowadays, so uh, liked by others. Something called emotional intelligence, which is not, I guess, the whole thing, this whole notion came up maybe 50 or 60 years ago, and it was looked as a way of trying to uh, challenge, basically to challenge smart people, to challenge the notion of IQ. And yeah, it was brought up. I do see the points. I do take them into consideration, but I do think it can be separated from the MBTI. I think can be separated from typology. I think it can be separated from socionics. There's quite a myriad of systems of how to uh, categorize people. There's the like I there's the Enneagram as well. There's the Big Five factor, uh, which is maybe a little bit more of a scientific view because it pinpoints traits and doesn't make as broad generalizations as the uh, MBTI test may do, at least the online ones. But yeah, back to the point of, I'm sorry, I went off on a tangent there, but yeah, back to the point of whether you can compare it to astrology. Astrology, we could say it was a rudimentary form of all these same things that we are talking about. We can we can say it was maybe sort of a medical, physical consideration, um, but as as well as Carl Jung's theories being somewhat metaphysical as well, because it includes archetypes and the existence of a sort of collective consciousness that subsumes our individual uh, consciousnesses, which we kind of go through enacting higher order stories, basically. So, someone that is a thinking type is enacting the story, the narrative of a thinker as he moves through life, and going here and saying, hey, that's not right because X does not equal Z. Boom. Yeah, you know what I mean? So, or the feeler going around being like, hey, you can't hurt me. That hurts. I'm sorry if I made that sound corny, but yeah, that's kind of what is going on in these kind of things. The sensor going around, the extroverted sensor is kind of it, it, it's known as I think they go around being a little bit hedonistic, like, hey, yeah, put their chest out, or uh, yes, it's stereotype. I know this is stereotypical, yes, but yeah, they go out, put their chests out, for the extroverted sensing guys, they get the ladies, because they're very quick, they're smooth, they're suave, and then for the introverted sensors, they're calm, and they're constantly, thinking of uh, what sort of pleasurable sensations come with uh, the world around them, taste, uh, what sort of sensations they want to repeat. Uh, yeah, it's pleasurable, sensations that were repeated, and people with intuition that just kind of pop out of nowhere and just like, yeah, this is right, like, I just know, and people kind of go, oh, well, how do you just know? And it's, yeah, they, they'll be like, I just know. That's the hunch, the intuition. That's more to do with the introverted intuition, kind of knowing without knowing how they know. Yeah, the material is kind of all just there, and it pops up, and they get to say all kinds of stuff, because everything for an introverted intuitive kind of happens underneath the surface, and they have access to all of this whenever they feel like it. And then the extroverted intuitive goes, hey, that thing over there looks like that thing over there, so let's combine this thing and that thing to make this thing. Yeah, they're very abstract. They can see patterns, make connections between the patterns. But we see these where these whole uh, types come in. That, like, say, the 16 types is that people, even though they have um, maybe they lead with a dominant function. So if we were to say um, everyone led with a certain function, then they the next few functions uh, have to be one of the other, have to be all the other three, and they all carry some sort of um, orientation, and this is at least consciously, and then the last function being almost unconscious. It's relatively conscious, but it's kind of the doorway. Yeah, that's the best way to put it. It's the doorway to the unconscious. Um, so yeah, uh, what Carl Jung originally thought would be that if a person had um, the first function as being um, extroverted, and the remaining three would be introverted, and vice versa. If he had a first function being um, introverted, the rest of the functions would be extroverted. I don't know if I said that right, but yeah. Anyways, that is kind of just some background that I would like to give on maybe what the MBTI was derived from, where I think it draws validity from. Um, yeah, it's not, uh, it's the fact that Myers-Briggs has the kind of extrovert. If you have an extroverted first function, your second is introverted, your third is extroverted, and your last is uh, the opposite orientation of the dominant. So introverted uh, in this case. But yeah, the this was not arbitrary at all. There were kind of observations which she conducted, and these were still in line with the original theory of the dominant being opposite from the inferior functions orientation. The only point of disagreement was in the middle two functions, which I tend to see not as a real disagreement. It ends up being that in other versions of typology, socionics, both model A and G, um, the the types uh, end up being able to, they have a dominant function. Their secondary function, whether it is introverted or extroverted, they tend to be able to use both um, sides of the coin there. And um, with the third function usually being an exception, and where um, the the third function's opposite is usually more difficult. Uh, and that could be for a variety of reasons, uh, neurally. So in the brain, it could have reasons that stem uh, in the brain. But yeah, it still ends up being that these are not necessarily conflicting. They don't necessarily conflict with the original theory, um, which everyone believes there is a dominant and then an inferior. Um, but yeah, that's kind of my spiel on this whole thing. I kind of just wanted to get this out there. It's Yeah, it's something I found a lot of people might have not been very aware of, um, and yeah, I do know that modern psychologists kind of don't tend to use Jung's theories a lot in their practice. There's a kind of a separation. There's a, a subset of psychologists called Jungian analysts that still use these things in their practice. Um, Although most of them tend to use it with a mix of other forms of treatment for psychological problems, therapy. So it's one of many different ways that one can help others. But but ultimately, I don't think anyone has, let's say, um, falsified any of his theories. I don't think anyone can get around personality being a thing, and personality also being somewhat repeatable over. You can iterate it over different people from different cultures in the world, um, and you can find common themes. So the fact that yes, we are all individuals, we are all special snowflakes, every single one of us. Okay, everyone's special. So I people that might want to use that as a way to say, oh, but that means I'm not special and I'm just one of the 16 types. No, you're not just one of the 16 types. You're a person, you have a brain, you have family, you have friends, you have a life that you grew up in separate from everyone else's. You see the world different than every single other person. This is, yeah, that's it would be a stretch to say um, that the types encompass all of who you are. And yeah, I think I will end this recording here. Um, Please subscribe below. Click to subscribe. I support, or I would appreciate the support. Um, and again, I apologize. I do not have the best equipment, so some of these videos may look like a little bit low quality right now, but I expect to get better with time. You know, it's gonna be all right. All right. Thank you. It's been Irrational Skeptic signing off.